Hello boys and girls, and those who have bought this wonderful product. Just thought I'd give a few little hints as to the way I would do this, or have done in the past with reasonable success. These drums, the way we've recorded them, they're already EQ'd. But that doesn't mean that they're going to work for everything you do. You know, obviously you've got to tailor the drums to fit the music. What I did make sure of, though, when we were doing this, because when you're getting a drum sound, usually they sound after you've accomplished, you know, a bass drum that works and a snare that's representable, etc. As soon as you listen to them with the other instruments, especially if it's electric guitars, hard rock and roll, the sound changes drastically. You have a lot more work to do. So we did listen with bass and guitars, just to make sure that that part of the work had been done. So hopefully you won't have any problems. And of course the other thing is, when you go to lift this up on whatever sort of music you're doing, you will have to make certain adjustments. But they shouldn't have to be, fishing around. Most of it's there. Now, one of the things that I've learned to do over the years is this. When you're positioning the drums, a lot of people, and I've never quite understood why they do this, is they'll pan the toms all the way out to the side, they'll make the hi-hat go over here, and well, in actual fact, drums don't sound like that, even if you stand right in front of the kit. And the way I try and make my records sound is as if you're at a really good rehearsal, and you're standing about 10 or 12 feet back from the stage. So the drums are coming from one place. Also, this helps in the mix too, because if you take the drums and you move them in from the sides, and also the effects, you're bound to be using some kind of cheese on the snare, some non-linear reverb or something. You bring that in about 3/4 and the room mics, same with the toms, hi-hat more or less up the middle, and then that leaves space on the sides for your other stuff. Of course, you don't have to do that. It all depends on the song. One of the reasons that I work so hard on the drums, and I've sought that out for so many years, is because in loud rock and roll, the drums are really the only acoustic instrument in the rhythm section. And they're the only ones with real transients. You're not going to get that out of guitar amps. On the vocal, that's fairly linear, you know. As far as transients go, you're not getting it out of them. So the drums supply the hi-fi quality. And we have that with this. So don't be frightened of any top end or anything. You don't want to make it harsh. But if you've got drums with a lot of air in them, then you're halfway there, you know. If the drum sound's no good and it's small and horrible, you might as well pack your bags and go home if you're doing a session. There are 4 room mics here. I don't know whether you want to use all 4. I probably wouldn't. But you have the luxury of doing whatever you want. I guess that's the whole idea of this. And the way it's been explained to me is you can control the amount of leakage into the room mics, which is all very wonderful. We've never been able to do that before. Something that's always pissed me off, but of course just a matter of taste. Michael Jackson sold a lot of records this way, is having the snare louder than the vocal. It doesn't make any sense. But if you're looking to get a snare drum balance between the bass drum and the snare, check your meters when you're doing the actual balance. And the bass drum, in actual fact, should be kicking a little harder than the snare. Otherwise, when you finish the thing, you're going to be asking yourself, what happened to the bass drum? That's a pretty simple trick. You probably already know that. And I thought I'd give some general hints just on mixing. I don't know whether you're interested or not. You can skip over this. But it's worked for me in the past. Quite often, when I'm mixing, I'll take the drums and then do a stereo mix of them on another 2 channels and compress them. So then you've got compressed and uncompressed. And obviously, you know, you balance it out the way you want it. And that can be quite helpful, especially if you want the room mic sound to spring up a little bit. I'm going to go on from drums a little bit. Just some stuff that might help you when you're recording the rhythm section. There's a very nice trick for bass guitar that I actually stole from somebody out of a book. But I was in the book too, so it's not total plagiarism. And you might have noticed this. When you're recording bass and using a direct and a mic as well, you're always going to get some phase problems. It's about 3 or 4 milliseconds, and you can run the direct through a device and pull it back a little bit. And that will change the sound tremendously, and you might want to try that because it can be quite useful. But here's a way around that. When you're miking the bass, take a decent mic, some kind of condenser. I use a 414 AKG. And you put that in figure of 8, and you move it back, I don't know, about 4.5 feet, something like that. And then mix the two together. Now, the mic on its own doesn't sound particularly special, but when you're going to mix the two sounds together, you're not going to get these phase problems now because the mic's too far away. And that solves that. So you can use that if you want. The other thing, when it comes to guitars, very simple trick. Take a couple of 57s, you know, Shores, and put them on one of the speakers at 45-degree angle, like this. Then you don't have to search around looking for a sweet spot. And the one right in front, dead on, is going to give you the brights. And then this one here gives you the bottom end. You mix them kind of even. And then you might even want to throw on another mic, another dynamic mic like a Sennheiser 421 or an AKG 414. Get a bit more bottom end. That's a pretty good trick. Works for me every time. Of course, if the amp's no good, you bug it anyway, and that's the most important thing to start with, isn't it? Something else that I use a lot now, I guess you could say I'm a bit stuck in my ways, but it's my standard setup for mixing vocals, and it gives them a nice space on their own. You take your vocal and you compress it, obviously, when you're recording, otherwise the guy's going to be unintelligible, and probably compress it again when you mix. But you get a short delay, about 28 to 32 milliseconds in that area. Bring that up. We used to call it ADT, automatic double tracking, but of course it isn't anything like that at all, but that'll give it a space. And then you take another delay, anywhere between 350 and 650, depending on the tempo of the song, and mix that in underneath. And when you put it into the mix, it shouldn't be audible as hello, hello, hello type of thing, unless you want that in certain spots. But what it'll do is it'll round out the vocal almost like reverb, except it's not clouding the issue like reverb, which is spreading all over the place and gets in the way. That's a nice thing to try. There's something else you might want to just check out. I tend to put lead solos or guitar breaks off to the side, and that's also because it draws your attention away from the center of the mix, which is good, and also it stops the competition going on in the middle where you've already got the drums, the bass, the vocal, maybe even some kind of stereo keyboard is going on. So I'll always put those to the side, and if you mix it properly, it's not as if you're going to, when you're walking through the room, just because it's on one speaker, make it sound weird. That works great. You probably do that already too. But I thought I'd mention it. The other thing is when it comes to using room mics on guitars, well, if it's a quick tempo, you really don't need that. It just takes up space. The only time that I would bother with that is if it's half time or it's a very slow song and you want the one guitar to sound big, and then you make a room mic and you put it to the other side, and it sounds like he's in a room, obviously. That's kind of cool. But quite often I got guys saying to me, Andy, let's put a room mic on a guitar, and it's in D, and it's, you know, about this tempo, hit da hoo da ya hoo, and you're never going to hear that. It just takes up space on there. Now, you probably